What is up, Rotogrinders? Welcome back to the NFL Pick Six Show, week number 17. One more to go after this one. As always, Rich Hribar from Sharp Football Analysis is here. John Daigle from NBC Sports, from a Good Football Show podcast. From your podcast I listened to on Tuesday night when you hate answering start-sit questions. I absolutely love listening to. Just go check out the article. Check out the article. That's you for a half hour. That's what I listened to before the show.
This week was even more complicated because you get lots of questions about the Bills wide receivers, the Vikings running backs, and they literally changed the rules like after the column was written. And I was like, listen, like we literally have to wait for tomorrow. In fact, like Dean, if you're checking in tonight, I'm doing one more massive update tonight just because like the rules literally changed. 100 players came off the COVID list Wednesday afternoon. Like, how do you expect to make content for that on a Tuesday? So I imagine Rich has been updating all day as well.
Rich, how about yourself? Have you been updating all sorts of stuff throughout the day?
Yeah, I mean, yesterday as I was writing up games too, you're waiting, just trying to see news. You could see it coming, that they were going to change it. So you try to be ahead of what you could, but yeah, I mean, it does change a lot, especially, like what's going on with the Colts, especially, they were going to be a team that was really going to be seeing who they could field on Sunday. And now they're going to maybe have more or majority of their team back in a game that they could have, maybe potentially lost and gave away and made their playoff implications something different. So, yeah, I mean, it's the NFL, man. They're solving one thing at a time here and ending all of life's biggest conundrums.
It is funny, though, that it took Ian Book playing football for the league to say, okay, no more of this. Something has to be done.
Enough.
Get the players back on the field.
Yeah, that was the last straw. Ian Book, oh boy, that was an absolute disaster.
Yeah, I mean, in a season of absolutely miserable quarterback play, Ian Book was the cherry on top.
Very much the Drew Lock of 2020. Like, if you're bad in a year where no quarterback is bad, get your ass back to the bench. That was Ian Book of 2021.
He was somehow worse than Jake Fromm. Nah, he wasn't. Jake Fromm was
I
worse.
don't know. Yeah.
Jake Fromm was worse.
Gonna break down the main slate this week. Of course, 14 games. Gonna do that in a second. You guys know how this works. We focus on 3 main games and break it down from all possible angles. Let me kind of run it back as far as our favorite players, position by position, of players that are not in those 3 main games. Before we do that, John, I know you have a bit of a sweat as far as I'm sure we have some season-long people. I assume we have some season-long people joining us that maybe they got knocked out last week. They want to give DFS a shot. Welcome. What's up, y'all? And do hit that like button on YouTube. Subscribe. Turn on notifications. All that good stuff. John, how is your season-long team going? I believe you're somewhere around what is in the 25th or so in the big old contest.
Yeah, the large Vegas main event draft that we talked about last week. Myself, Connor Allen, and Ryan Noonan of 444 Football were in 73rd place. And we jumped to 28th overall this past week. So very clearly massive leaps can happen. And there's one more week left. We'll see what happens. We are not most likely, barring a catastrophic injury ravage for the first place team. The Go Bills, the trio of men who put together the first place team, basically can't be toppled. They had the nuts. They have Jonathan Taylor, Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, Cooper Kupp. They literally drafted the absolute nut. Mark Andrews, they drafted the nuts. And good for them. They created an absolute monster team. They deserve the 500K. But we literally are live for the 100K second place. We're just right there. So we need probably 150 to 180 points. We've scored over 140 in 4 consecutive weeks now. Helps out a ton. And yeah, we'll see what happens. We don't have Cooper Kupp, but we still have some monsters and good matchups like your Austin Eckler, Aaron Jones. We have Mark Andrews. We got a choice to make between Dalton Schultz and Michael Pittman. We'll see if we get Lamar back or if we want to go Tua and Jalen Waddle. So yeah, we got some choices and we're just surging along strong here. Hopefully a big payout.
Rich, do you answer a question, start sit on a Wednesday night? What do you think? Schultz versus Pittman?
I mean, we got to know if Wentz is playing, so we're gonna have to ride that one into the 11th hour.
That's it.
Hey, but there's no Thursday game this week, so no one needs to ask any start-sit questions until Sunday morning.
Dean heard that on the Tuesday chat as well. That was my answer quite often.
Yeah, no, but I want to know who I'm playing 5 days from now.
I mean, the NFL, we don't know who's going to be playing in the NFL still, because even though with all these rules have changed, remember, anyone that goes on the COVID list basically from this point on isn't playing Sunday. So you still got to hold your breath. The only good thing is that so many good players have already been on the COVID list, they can't go back on. Tyreek isn't going to be back on. Nick Chubb, that's already player. Austin Eckler, all these juggernauts that have already been on it, we're good. They're not going to go back on the rest of the year.
And I was looking, it kind of defines the slate as well, because even if we lose a couple good players, remember, all the bye weeks are done. They put 2 bad teams into Steelers and Browns on Monday night. So we don't even have to worry about those players that we weren't going to worry about on the main slate to begin with. So we still have good players no matter what happens here. Even if you're looking down at paying down at quarterback this week, and maybe you can if you're trying to fit some monsters, all the studs are playing in the main slate. So we're just pretty much done with being cute moving forward. And we're now on to we get some monsters in our lineups.
How did things work out for yourself, Rich? DFS wise, season long wise, you got anybody in the ship?
Yeah, I had 3 teams get through. I wish it was a lot more, but man, we don't ever talk about it in this show because we don't talk about it. But last week I had absolutely beautiful lineups that were sabotaged by team defense selection. We don't ever talk about it. I had the wrong team defenses. I mean, I had so much the lineup that Adam Levitan won the 250K with. In that same contest, I basically had the same lineup, but didn't have Burkhead, and I had a bunk defense. I had a ton of Burrow, and literally Falcons, Chargers, and Bengals D just absolutely wrecked me. If I would have just been on Eagles, Bucks, and Chiefs, we would have won an absolute bunch of money.
The only there is a skeleton key, and that's just playing the defense opposite the Giants. If you do that every week and hit the 16-point floor, you'll get there every week.
Yeah, I gotta get more on that. We got 2 weeks left to play defenses against the Giants.
Shout out to Levitan, 250K on FanDuel, one of the absolute.
The Burkhead call was. Even though you see in hindsight, they played the Chargers, whatever. It was Burkhead. He had more than 60 yards in a game the entire season. Absolute smash play.
And same price as Ronald Jones and Alexander Madison. So it's just right there hiding underneath the blankets. So it was.
I was off Madison when he got the touchdown. I was pretty bummed, but coming off COVID against the Rams, I was I'm going to fade him even at 55, and it worked out for the most part. But like I said, team defense, we don't talk about team defense and defense selection, but absolutely cost me. It cost me 6 figures for sure.
Oh man, that's brutal. It helped me last week, by the way. And you know what else helped me? Shout out to you guys talking about Cincinnati and throwing the ball. And I did get myself a Burrow with Boyd and Higgins and Philadelphia. And I finished 6th or so in that big old Yahoo contest, $1 million contest over there in Yahoo.
Awesome.
So tied with a couple of people too. I got duped, but I hadn't been able to partake in top of the show at last few weeks. You guys I crushed this and I crushed that, and I'm yeah. Rough day for your boy. But finally, got up and made myself a profit week last week. Looking forward to this week as well. 2 more slates.
But to be fair, Dean, that was the first time. It took 16 weeks for you to listen to us. And then you end up winning some money.
And also, Dean, remember, I talked about being a volatile situation, which it is, but also we know on the show, we play probabilities, and volatility also means that it could hit its floor, but also it could just crush the entire slate. And guess what it did? It crushed the entire slate. So while I understand that 12% Joe Burrow was an amazing play with the stacks, I also was okay, but they could just run again on first down. We'll talk about that in a second because they didn't. But I went for 3% Josh Allen and 1% Isaiah McKenzie, which did make me have a winning day, but it wasn't Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, Jamar Chase winning day. So I will keep complaining that I had the right play as my wife leaves me. No big deal.
I can't complain about the Boyd second touchdown getting taken down. Am I allowed to do? What are the rules? If you win money, you're supposed to be happy and you won money. But I did do the thing because Boyd scored a second touchdown and was taken down, and nobody had Boyd basically. He was 1.5% owned, and I feel I was.
Well, he didn't catch it. To be fair, he didn't catch it. So
I didn't see
can't be upset. Yeah, it was clearly incomplete. It wasn't anything it wasn't a holding penalty or something got called back or they ruled it a touchdown, but it was clearly incomplete and they reviewed it and it got overturned pretty quickly. So you can't be too upset.
I was away from the TV. I was watching, of course, Red Zone, and I hear touchdown for Boyd and Philadelphia defense touchdown. I'm oh man, my team might have just shot up. And then I saw the boys.
He mossed the dude.
Away,
he mossed the dude on it, and it just came out on the back end.
That was and he was obviously in the Millie winning lineup over Levitan at second place. And that was such a good call too for Boyd. We talked about it too, how the last 3 games before that one, he had popped up a little bit with at least 5 targets, was getting more involved. So especially if you considered that one a shootout for the Bengals offense, like that was the sneaky second pivot to have. So what a great call.
Yeah. So speaking of Boyd, that is he's in our first game. We're going to talk about Kansas City at Cincinnati. Cincinnati currently getting 5 points, 50 as far as the total on the board. Pretty big number, second biggest number on the board this week. We'll talk about the biggest number in a second as well. Daigle, your thoughts as far as this game? Kansas City, I believe they're fully motivated because they want to get that number 1 spot. I did not have a chance to dig into motivation and things like that. Usually that's like a last week of the season kind of thing, last couple of weeks of the season. But I believe Kansas City is trying for that number 1 spot. If you
this used to be the last week of the season.
Yeah,
feels like the last week of the season.
It feels like we're just going through the motions now. Daigle, what are your thoughts as far as KC? Oh, it is worth noting, and there's really no way of quantifying this, but what was it a note from Mahomes talking about Tyreek coming back from COVID and saying like he was breathing really hard in the huddle, and like how do you quantify that in your in your spreadsheets and things like that? And different people react in different ways. We see some players come back. Well, some guys didn't practice, and all of a sudden they're not playing. A guy like Gaskin. I don't know how to handle that. I don't know how to game script for that, but that's a thing. When you consider like guys like Austin Eckler, we see how that goes down. We're assuming he comes back this week from COVID issues. All right. We're talking about Kansas City, Daigle. What do you have for me?
Well, now that these guys have 8 to 10 days to get off the COVID list, most of them, I would think they would be back to normal, like a Tyreek Hill, just in playing 42% snaps last week because he was activated on Saturday, essentially. Then we should have figured that he would be limited. I thought even then it was a good spot to pivot off of him, even though we knew his ceiling, if playing at full, was very similar to Cooper Kupp, whomever else, Justin Jefferson you had at the top there. Let's start with the Bengals offense, though, actually, because, again, we're in a situation like last week to where there are reasons to be somewhat worried. We discussed, as we talked about at the top, the volatility of the Bengals offense after they handed off on 17 of 22 first downs against the Broncos. Was not the case this past week against the Ravens, as everyone who played Joe Burrow is very well aware. Threw on 21 of 35 first downs this past week. And now we have this little bit of a sample. In 2 games against the Ravens here, the Bengals have passed on 36 of 62 first downs for 10.7 yards per attempt, 58% pass play rate in those games. Whereas in all their other games, just 43%, which is the 5th lowest in the entire league. So the narrative or the stats could say go one way or the other, but honestly, it just seems like a little bit of a fake courage from Zach Taylor. We even saw him passing up 30 points in the 4th quarter. John Harbaugh getting a little bit pissed at him, and reasonably so, coming out to the middle and literally just like mouthing, like, "What are you doing? Like, what's the game plan here? What
was
is
that
going
personal
on?"
Though? Was there some sort of backstory with Burrow in Baltimore, and like they kind of sticking to him like in previous years?
A little bit,
that
yes.
was a thing.
Cincinnati also has averaged over 7 yards per play in 3 games this year. 2 of those instances have come against Baltimore. We know how other teams attack the Ravens, so really no shock that Joe Burrow and everyone got there. So if that's the case, and like we're not talking about the Ravens here, we're talking about the Chiefs defense instead. Like there is a sample here that says, okay, well maybe the Bengals just go back to being the offense they are and slow it down despite being successful on first downs. Because even in those 13 other games, they were averaging over 8.5 yards per attempt through the air. It wasn't the fact of how successful they were, though. Zach Taylor still slowed them down because he wants to be a run first offense in every other contest. So I am slightly worried, famous last words yet again, about the Bengals juice here.
Are you worried, Rich?
I mean, they have a pretty fishy team total this week, well below their seasonal output. So that was the first thing that kind of caught my eye when I was doing this game. And then when you just kind of get under the hood, I mean, this could go a number of ways. This could totally be a game because we see teams take the bait against the Chiefs all the time, right? Where they try to slow the game down and try to minimize possessions. It could be, a donkey like Zach Burrow could Zach Taylor across the both up could totally be like that. Like, oh, I'm going to try to limit possessions. We're going to try to establish Joe Mixon instead of, the way to beat the Chiefs is to just go and do it like the Chargers have tried, right? Like this year, like we're going to try to score a bunch of points. That's the goal. We're going to just try to outscore the Chiefs. And we've seen some of these Chiefs games let down, right? Like there's been a number of times this year where we've circled the Chiefs game, be like, yeah, this would be the bonanza, right? This is going to be the game. And then they don't, it's just not good. It's a boring game. Nothing really gets there. The Chiefs defense has been playing good. This will be an interesting kind of test in a cat and mouse game too, and how they approach it. Obviously we've been doing this 16 weeks, and we've talked about Joe Burrow versus the blitz. The Chiefs are one of the more aggressive defenses in the NFL, and over this hot streak, they did not dial back the blitz against Dak Prescott. They did not dial back the blitz against Justin Herbert a couple weeks ago. So if they're gonna, still remain aggressive, we've brought up the splits a number of times on the show, how Joe Burrow has eviscerated the blitz. So we'll see, how the Chiefs want to approach it, because from the gap of the last time Burrow played the Ravens till this Sunday, he was the least blitz quarterback in the NFL. And the Ravens said, well, we'll try a little bit, right? Like they blitzed him on almost 30% of his dropbacks, and he got absolutely smoked again. So it's going to be see what the Chiefs, take from that and what kind of defense they play. Because remember, the 6 previous games before this Ravens game, Joe Burrow threw 6 touchdown passes. So, I mean, they got a fishy team total. We've seen some of these Chiefs games be kind of boring, not the pinball machine arcade type games that we have seen in years past. But definitely, if you're looking at it from an objective stance, this game has a lot of really good players and can absolutely get there as well.
Bengals also atop the NFC, the AFC North. They're fully incentivized to do their best to get the W here. 1 game ahead of Baltimore, 1 game ahead of Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh, never mind. Pittsburgh got a tie. I missed that for some reason. So I guess a game and a half. They're incentivized to win. Just kind of throwing that out there for what it's worth. Rich, if you're digging through, the routes run and things like that, and now Kansas City defends, who becomes your favorite Cincinnati receiver?
I mean, by default of what where the Chiefs are weakest at, they're weakest against slot receivers, but it's tough to still the way Tyler Boyd has gotten there the last 2 weeks is really tough because he's been schemed open on 2 magnificent plays. Both of his touchdowns were just absolutely tremendous plays where he got just the free run to basically go and run 50 yards for touchdowns. That's tough to really kind of count on happening because that's how he's getting there. And he still is not getting you high yardage games. All of his yardage are coming on those 2 masterfully designed plays. So he's great if you can get that touchdown at low ownership like you almost got last week. But it's really kind of tough to chase those kind of plays with him. I still believe that T. Higgins is the guy that you still look at because he's the guy that leads the team in third down targets since he's been back. He's the team that leads the team in targets against the blitz. He's the foxhole guy. He's Burrow's foxhole guy. Chase is the big money splash play guy, but T. Higgins has been the foxhole receiver. But the Chiefs have been really good against boundary receivers this entire season. And they've been good against receivers for multiple years now. This is a 3-year running sample where they've really been good against boundary wide receivers without having elite cornerback play because they're aggressive. They play a lot of man defense. They don't really give up splash plays. But yeah, I mean, I just think T. Higgins is, based on the way he's used, is the guy that he has the more stable floor than Chase. Chase has the higher ceiling, but Higgins, you've seen he has a higher floor than Chase does.
John, you agree?
Completely agree. I was leaning the same way with Higgins over Jamar Chase for that very reason. If they tend to get aggressive, that's the thing. And we've seen situations where, like Rich said, the Chiefs leaned back against the blitz, but we even knew that Dak was amazing against the blitz, for instance. And it seems like that Cowboys Chiefs games was such a long time ago. But even then, at least the Chiefs scaled back somewhat against Dak. So yeah, it would be Higgins in that case. Otherwise, if they settle in, I would lean maybe a little bit of recency bias, but still Higgins and Boyd double stacks if you want to go all in on this game. Also, Joe Mixon, I understand he's been under now 4 yards per carry in his last 4 games. We talked about him last week strictly as a unique pivot and way to expose yourself to that game, just in case it was run heavy. The good thing is if you did play him in that game, at least we saw the usage bump. Even after that ankle sprain in week 15, he returned last week with his most snaps, 82% since week 2, and 6 targets, his most since mid-season. And so basically with 35 routes on Burrow's 55 dropbacks, back to being a full-time player, but also heavily used over Samaj P. Ryan in the passing game, also with 24 of 27 backfield touches. So I think Mixon also a clever way if you're looking to skinny stack this game if you're scared to just fade it entirely.
Yeah, we've talked about Mixon this season. I mean, the Mixon, if you just look at his splits, his game splits, and just look at the games he's using the passing game and what he's not, and then look at his fantasy ceiling. I mean, it's amazing how night and day the production is. In games where he just has more than 2 catches, he's been the RB4 or higher in weekly scoring in all 6 games. And then in the game, he has 9 games with 2 or fewer catches, and he's finished higher than RB23 once. It's just when they get religion to finally throw him the football, his fantasy ceiling just gets completely unlocked. Because like John said, he didn't run the football extremely effectively in that game, 18 for 65. He had the 1-yard touchdown, but it was all the receiving work he got that gave him that extra spice. And then he caught an extra touchdown in the receiving game. But it literally is when the Bengals get religion to throw him the football is when he takes off, and you see the ceiling. This is why everyone keeps going back to him every year in fantasy football, because we know it's there, and it keeps we're loosey with the football every week. Watch him get 2 targets this week, and we'll be like, what the hell's going on?
And unfortunately, we've seen him pop up for at least 4 targets in 6 games this year. But in 3 of those, in the next game, he had just 1 target.
Right.
The frustrating part is there's been no consistency to his passing game usage. It pops up, and then we play him, and then we leave our slates pissed off. So that's the maddening part here.
Yeah, it's not as pronounced, but Dalvin Cook's the same way. It's like, why the hell is this dude not being used as a pass catcher?
You got to get Samaje Perine involved. It's a few weeks ago. I don't really know if it still holds up or not, but I remember that Jim Sans tweet as far as FanDuel specific. No player was in more optimal lineups throughout the season than Joe Mixon. I think it was like 5 or 6 weeks or something like that. That was a few weeks ago. He probably has some in the optimal of late, but just, the ceiling is certainly interesting. Rich, the Kansas City side, how much are you prioritizing Patrick Mahomes as a quarterback? If we're assuming CEH is not going to play this week, who knows? We'll see. He did not practice on Wednesday. Probably Williams is the guy. I don't know how much you need him. Of course, Fort is lurking to some degree. Then there's Tyreek Hill at his worst game last week, all season long. There was the COVID thing. They also didn't need him. They absolutely walloped Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh just was not pushing back. And then you have Kelsey coming back from his COVID. I don't know if he had COVID or if it's post-contact. I don't recall. But again, a lot of these guys coming back, different things, and who knows what to expect. And he's expensive. And a lot of the big boys for tight end are on the main slate. So what do we do with the Kansas City pieces?
Yeah, that's something we've talked about all year with the Chiefs is, they've still been a really elite offense in context of the 2021 NFL season. It's just that we grade them against previous Chiefs teams. So we're used to seeing the Chiefs be kind of this like team that just doormats other teams. And that's been the case this year. But the last 3 weeks, they're first in the NFL in points per play. They're just doing it a different way this year. Everything's short, underneath, yak. Mahomes now is the highest percentage of yards now generated after the catch. And we saw that again last week. I mean, that second Pringle touchdown was absolutely ridiculous. I mean, this dude pulled out the phantom juke. That was impressive. But yeah, it's tough to pay for these guys, right? Because we've seen the floor. Like we know that there's been multiple times we've gone to them at these price points, and the price has never waned with these guys. Like it's never like we've never gotten like Tyreek at like 7.5 on FanDuel, or like they just maintain upper echelon pricing. You're paying for what you get for only one outcome, right? So that's what makes it tricky with these guys every week. Plus they eat up so much of your roster allotment. You know, if you want to play Tyreek Hill or Travis Kelce, like you're basically saying you have no shot to play Jonathan Taylor or Cooper Kupp, guys that have just been more stable and more worth paying up for at that price. That's what makes them more tournament plays. I'm more interested to see what happens with Daryl Williams, though, because, he's a guy that if CEH doesn't play, I mean, he had 19 or more touches in every game but one that CEH missed, and is like the inverse of what we talked about Joe Mixon. Like he is the guy that gets all the pass game work, even when he's bad in the run game. And that's what the Bengals are. They're really good against the run, backfields stopping the run, and they're really bad against backfields against the pass. So like there's kind of some symmetry of how Daryl Williams scores his points. So with another week of fantasy ghosts like Rashad Penny and guys that are going to be in play, like Daryl Williams might go just a little bit overlooked, especially if you're stacking this game and going with like an onslaught approach.
John, are you in on Williams this week if CEH is out?
Oh, buddy, we're in on the mentor every single week.
That's your guy.
He's a starter. He's like my worst. He's my best worst guy. We also saw him against the Raiders. Remember, he mossed that one cornerback for a touchdown as well. We've already seen, like Rich said, like that's who they run through. Not only do their running backs, since the Chiefs bye, have 25 combined targets, like as their third receiver. They don't let like Byron Pringle, who did step up and lead the team in routes run this past week since Tyreek Hill was limited. But overall, like Josh Gordon, McCole Hardman, Byron Pringle, like these guys just aren't involved when Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce are at full speed. It's been their running back, whomever that's been. And now Daryl Williams, like even in those games he had the touches, also averaged 5.5 targets and an 11.5% target share in 5 games without Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Some people may get cute and try the Derek Gore thing, but remember, like Derek Gore, 13 of his touches, 10 of them came on the team's final 2 drives when they were already up 30-6. Like, of course, they were just playing them when the game didn't matter anymore. Whereas he was available for the 5 games Edwards-Helaire missed previous this year, only averaged 5.5 carries, totaled 2 targets in those 4 games. He's just not involved. It is Daryl Williams' show. So yeah, like if he's going to come in under rostered, like that's the best way to get exposure to multiple touchdown equity ways here.
You got any takes as far as the other pieces outside of them being tournament live, as far as Tyreek, as far as Kelce, as far as Mahomes? You feel strongly one way or the other? Of course, like they're always in play, but are they standing out to you, or just like guys you would sprinkle in tournaments, or what?
No, we just really haven't had a Mahomes slate that has mattered in so long. Like even the Thursday night game against the Chargers, that was a showdown. And that was, it was probably for a lot of reasons. We got some pushback, but also I still like to mention that Derwin James did go out in the first quarter and it changed the complexity, just changed the outlook of that game completely, as opposed to what type of defense the Chargers were trying to run with Derwin James on the field. So now, like, honestly, while the Chiefs are good, they don't, God, I hate saying this, but like they don't scare me for fantasy anymore. It's like, I don't mind fading them genuinely on these main slates. Now we're probably going to be in position like last week with the Bills where it's okay. But if we see a competitive game here and we get Patrick Mahomes like 5 to 8%, then I'm just locking him in because he's 5% Patrick Mahomes. That's really the only reason I played Josh Allen last week, because it's like, I know you have the same ceiling as all these other guys, and I see you at 3 to 5%. So what's the best way for me to get unique around this slate is to play this. So maybe I go that direction, but also Reeves hit on it with Tyreek Hill. It's the same story for Travis Kelce in a stacked tight end position where the top guys are now ending your world. Like if you miss out on the Mark Andrews slate breaking one, then you just miss out. Like you can't go, even Kyle Pitts was great last week, but when he's only like 1K off of Mark Andrews, like who cares? Andrews literally ends the world. So like playing Kelce around these other guys, we're going to have George Kittle, we're going to have Mark Andrews. It's just really tough for me.
Yeah, I mean, in tournaments, it's been hard to win paying down at tight end the last 4 or 5 weeks. I mean, it's been a pay up for tight end of the season run here, whether it be Andrews or those hot weeks that Kittle had, Kelsey's had a couple. Man, it's been really hard to just say I'm going to play on my 3K salary saver on DraftKings or my 5K salary saver on FanDuel and really come away. I had a bunch of Kyle Pitts last week and that worked out a little bit, but I mean, the Andrews teams were still the money makers.
Yeah, the other important thing to note is that 14-game slate, they're all on it, basically.
Yes.
So, like, if one big boy doesn't pay off, one of the other ones will. And, like Cole Kmet and his 11 DraftKings points, like, that might be usable if you, like, smash everything else as far as the big spends, but lineup construction matters, obviously. And, yeah, all right, we'll move on. Let's talk about Arizona and Dallas. Biggest total on the board, 52. That's a big old number. Dallas at home in a dome, which is important this time of year. 5.5-point favorite, Rich. Yeah, this seems like it's a fun game. Dallas fully incentivized, right? They're still trying to get that number 1 seed. And of course, they locked up the division. Arizona battling with the Rams as well. I'm not sure if they still have a chance to win that division. I think they're 1 game behind them. Rich, let's start with the Cowboys. Yeah, Zeke. Are we playing Zeke? Probably not. I mean, you can, but he says he's close to 100%. I feel like he keeps on saying that every single week. But yeah, starting the Dallas side, what's popping for you?
Yeah, I probably won't get there on Zeke still, but I mean, he's starting to look better than he did for that stretch where everyone knew he was injured and playing hurt. He's starting to look a little better. Still had some touchdown deodorant, and I know that he didn't play in the second half of that game, but he hasn't had more than 76 yards in a game since week 6. Arizona's allowed the fewest touchdowns to opposing running backs in the NFL. They'll give up some yards on the ground, but just 6 touchdowns allowed to opposing running backs entire season. If you had Jonathan Taylor on Christmas Day, you lived that life. You got the 100 yards and you got nothing else. But yeah, so I probably won't get there on Zeke. The Cowboys, I mean, it was definitely a ravaged Washington team on Sunday night and they took advantage of it. But I mean, this is kind of that's the best version of the Cowboys. It's kind of weird to say that, like, but just look at any time Dalton Schultz has actually been involved in like the output that Dak Prescott has had. Like when the Cowboys are like a quick hitting, like play action, exploit linebackers type of offense, that's when they've been their best the entire year. And we've seen now, when they get Dalton Schultz involved, like everyone kind of goes with it. So, I mean, I hate to be that simplified and just say like, hey, throw the ball, Dalton Schultz, it's going to make your offense good. That seems really stupid when you have an offense with CeeDee Lamb, Amari Cooper, and Michael Gallup. But that's when Kellen Moore has been his best, when they can run the football and they have offensive leverage. So hopefully they kind of roll that over this week. Arizona's been a lot better defense than, kind of what the Cowboys have faced the past 2 weeks, though, in the Giants and in Washington on Sunday night. But still, Dak looked good. He was mobile. He was running around. He hasn't run around all year. He was escaping the pocket on Sunday night. We love to see that. And then as good as, like I said, Arizona is compared to those other two defenses, they've still allowed 3 top 10 scoring weeks to Matthew Stafford, Jared Goff, and Carson Wentz. So like, we're not really scared of them either. And as a byproduct of not allowing any touchdowns to running backs, they've allowed the fewest touchdowns like the running backs. They've allowed the highest rate of offensive touchdowns to be passing touchdowns as a byproduct. 24, 32 touchdowns they've allowed have been passing. That's the highest rate in the league. And before I eat up all the shot clock here, that would just lead me to still trusting CeeDee Lamb the most out of the guys before you ask. Arizona's 31st in the league in points allowed to opposing slot receivers. They've allowed a league high 15 touchdowns to opposing slot receivers. So I would still go back to Lamb, even though he's been a little bit dormant here. He's still another guy that when you look at his floor, though, it's still been really, really solid for him still not having a spike week.
Can I just say, by the way, is that a Hribar original touchdown deodorant? I love that term. I don't know who came up with that one.
I think like Pianowski used to use that in the old
Yahoo it was Pianowski
columns.
too.
Yeah, he used to use like the old Yahoo breakfast table columns.
Scott's great. Yeah, that's always a fun line. The thing is with Dallas, and I ran a bunch of optimals, and it's on a Wednesday night, and they only mean so much, obviously. But John, like nobody really pops like from an optimal perspective on this Dallas side. They're all kind of like priced a little bit, kind of where they should be, or maybe a little bit too much. Of course, we don't care about that in tournaments. You're looking for ceiling, you're not looking for average and that kind of stuff. And this is a great game stack where you feel like both these teams can kind of go at each other. We can look at a potential 30-27 kind of game, and that's the kind of stuff that matters. We don't care about the average. We care about the potential ceiling. And this, you can't project CeeDee Lamb to go 150-2, but of course he can. And you want to take some shots at that. John, you have a similar thought there as far as like nobody in Dallas is great math-wise on paper and all that kind of stuff, despite the fact that they have a 29 total. They have Elliott and Pollard and Lamb and Cooper and Gallup and Schultz and only so many different places they can score touchdowns, too many different guys, so many mouths to feed, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, so for cash, I don't love anybody in Dallas right now, but for tournaments, obviously they're very much in play. Do you have a similar thought and, favorite player, favorite stack on the Dallas side?
I'll definitely be watching this one closely. I wonder what the narrative will be since the Cowboys did return to their vintage form, but also maybe people are telling themselves it was because of Washington's ravaged team. And maybe that was the case. But also remember just 2 weeks ago, the Cowboys were the popular play against the Giants and they failed for everyone on the main slate. So there may be some leftovers from that, but it's just an awesome spot. Cowboys have actually run the most plays the lead over the last month, but have still ranked in that time 4th in pass play rate with a lead, which is great for us if we're interested in these Dak double stacks. Even the Cardinals defense, ever since they lost JJ Watt, they're still blitzing. They were always a top 4 team in blitz rate, but they're still blitzing without Watt at a top 5 rate. As we know, Dak, like Burrow, has just been awesome against the blitz this year. 9.5 yards per attempt, 18 touchdowns, and just 4 picks. If they are going to blitz, CeeDee Lamb, to Rich's point, also leads the team in targets from man coverage. So that's also a plus. But we also saw a little bit of the squeaky wheel getting greased because Amari Cooper did publicly demand more targets, basically in the red zone as well. And they did feed him his highest target share since week 8 last week and a team high in red zone targets in that game. And then now, like Reeves mentioned, Dalton Schultz also emerging as the team's engine, like the Leonard Fournette of the Bucs, essentially, in the last 2 games with a 21.5% target share in that time. So yeah, you can easily get and convince yourself to get on any 2 of those. But yeah, it seems like, Lamb first and then probably Cooper and then Schultz for me. Or maybe I trade out Schultz and Cooper as we move along the week. But if the field's coming under these guys, this is a week where I am pretty confident in the Cowboys passing attack.
Jump to the Arizona side. Who knows what's going to happen with that running back situation. I presume if Connor is out, Edmonds, I think they're both limited as of Wednesday night. I think one didn't practice, which was Connor. I think Edmonds was limited. But, if only one plays, the other one doesn't, they would obviously rise. Ertz, is he their best? Is he the best target right now with Murray? The Kirk Green, they're sort of fine, I suppose. Wesley, you can throw darts at, but yeah, if you're talking about the Arizona side, John, who are you pairing with Murray? Who's the most appealing? And touch on the running back situation, which I think is kind of obvious, right? If one is gone, the other one becomes elevated. Duh.
Yeah, let's touch on the Cardinals offense as a whole, because now we've seen 2 games without DeAndre Hopkins that Kyler has played. Because remember, Kyler was out in weeks 9 through 12, and every game that Hopkins was also out for. We basically only had Colt McCoy evidence splits to work with. But now in these last 2 games, the Cardinals offense has essentially just been less explosive and efficient. Still throwing the ball, Kyler is at the same downfield rate, but averaging just 8 yards per attempt and a 30% completion rate on those throws, 20 plus yards deep, compared to 18 yards per attempt and a 56% completion rate prior to Hopkins being out these past 2 weeks. Also just 5.6 yards per pass play these last 2 games, because these targets that Hopkins used to accumulate are now being filtered through, undrafted Antoine Wesley, who's a good player, but is with the Cardinals because he was initially scouted to Texas Tech by Cliff Kingsbury, AJ Green, and Christian Kirk. These guys who are just obviously better when Hopkins is trying to gain the best corner on the opposing defense. I also wonder how much of it is in-season regression happening, because they were scoring, the Cardinals were at the 3rd highest rate in the red zone through week 13. And now these past 2 weeks, just 1 for 6 scoring in that area. And so, yes, everyone kind of knows where the targets will be filtered, since Zach Ertz has led the team in routes run basically as an elite wide receiver the last 2 weeks without Hopkins. And the downfield shots have gone split between Antoine Wesley and Christian Kirk. We've also seen now 2 games in the past 2 years that Chase Edmonds has received like the full workload with the starter or someone behind him missing. And then last year it was 28 of 30 backfield touches. This year, first game without James Conner, 24 of 25 backfield touches. So Chase Edmonds, like even being used differently, even like gaining every single target underneath that Conner would even soak up in the red zone at some times. Like he's basically become a touch-based workhorse if Conner doesn't play.
Rich, your thoughts as far as Arizona? Yeah, I assume you're on board with most of that, if not all of that.
I mean, the Cardinals running backs have 6 combined RB1 scoring weeks, and just 1 came with both guys playing. So we need one of those guys to be out to kind of have a ceiling access for either player. And the Cardinals are interesting. I definitely believe the deep ball stuff is just natural regression. Like Kyler was so above board the entire season on deep throws. I don't necessarily believe that that's just 2-game sample worth of just saying, well, DeAndre Hopkins is out, his deep ball. I think it was just more natural. I definitely want to attribute to more of that. Because remember now, in Hopkins has missed the last 2 games, but Murray now has averaged 232 passing yards with a game high of 274 passing yards over his past 7 games played, when over the first 5 games this season, he averaged 330 passing yards with a low of 268. Like there has been a longer sample of this offense, not this passing game kind of coming back down longer than just Hopkins in these past 2 games. And also we saw Cliff Kingsbury in this offense coax really good production without Kyler Murray and without DeAndre Hopkins on the field. Like this is still a capable team of moving the football. I mean, we saw Colt McCoy average 9.6 yards per pass time against the 49ers. We saw him throw for 328 yards against the Seahawks in week 11 without DeAndre Hopkins. Like there's still offensive scheme and talent here to access production. Also, Kyler Murray, for as bad as his peripheral stats were, the dude had 22 fantasy points on Christmas. Like he's been running since he's come back. He has 136 rushing yards in his 3 games since he came back. He's had 208 rushing yards his opening 9 games this season. Dallas is 23rd in rushing points allowed to opposing quarterbacks this year. And as hot as Dallas has been defensively, and they're getting all the accolades, and they have a lot more talent this year. They've had 5 games this season against the fantasy quarterback 1, and just 2 of their past 12 games have they faced a guy that's a top 12 scorer on the season. So over the last month, they played Taylor Heineke twice, Mike Glennon, Taysom Hill. Like the Cowboys still give up big plays and high yards per play. So like there's still definitely this one to get there. Just kind of the Cardinals' recent kind of performances have made it a little more Jekyll and Hyde and give it a little more volatility. But I still look at the full season sample for the Cardinals, and there's definitely talent and scheme here to produce big numbers as well.
John, you got anything else as far as this game?
I think that's about it. If Connor's out, Edmonds is a good play, like Rich said. If they both play, then we can go to the wide receivers or Zach Ertz for the floor.
All right, game number 3, Rams at Baltimore. Baltimore currently getting 3.5 points, 46.5 is the total. Rich, we talked about that Baltimore secondary last week. Cooper Kupp against this Baltimore secondary, it's been the absolute worst as far as yielding FanDuel fantasy points per game to receivers. The absolute worst when it comes to yielding fantasy points to quarterbacks in the last 4 weeks. And now they got Cooper Kupp coming in. how do you think they handle Kupp? Are they going to, like we talked about it last week, as far as Baltimore, are they going to adjust? Is there a defensive coordinator who's going to do what he's going to do, no matter who's on the other side? And will they try to lock him down to some degree? And that will that potentially open up, guys like Beckham, guys like Jefferson as interesting tournament plays? Thoughts, of course, like Cooper Kupp is great, and that's that. What it's week 16. If you haven't figured that out at this point, we're not helping you. Where have you been? Well, what are we going to say?
The wild thing about the Ravens, as terrible as they've been the entirety of the season, they're actually 4th in the NFL in points allowed to opposing slot receivers, 3rd in slot receptions allowed, just because outside guys are just absolutely slaughtering them repeatedly. I don't think that really applies to anything to Kupp. I mean, the dude has fewer than 92 yards in one game this season. He's going to get his, but it does open up a little bit, I think, for the other guys. These guys aren't necessarily jabronis, the ancillary pieces here. There's some talent here on the Rams side. I mean, Odell does have like 3 freebie touchdowns out of his 4 touchdowns, but I mean, the dude has 4 touchdowns now with the Rams when he had 7 touchdowns in 29 games to the Browns. He still has he hasn't gone over 81 yards yet, so he's gotten a little bit of his production just stemming from those touchdowns. But this would be a game where he's running the full allotment of routes. Ravens being cooked on the outside. I can see going back to him. Van Jefferson hasn't caught a long one in a couple weeks, but he's basically touchdown or bust. I mean, you just look at his yardage and production. I mean, if he doesn't score a touchdown, he's giving you nothing. So those guys are a little more volatile, but it would be another game to go back to them. Tyler Higbee, interesting as well with the amount of time he's playing, but we've chased that rainbow a ton of times this season. But I think that's the way to get interesting, and you just got to hope Cooper Kupp doesn't score like last week. If you're going to build your stacks around the Rams, you go Stafford, and then you go either Beckham, Higbee, or, Beckham, Jefferson, or Jefferson, Higbee, and you hope Cooper Kupp doesn't score that touchdown because he's going to get his catches and yards. But if you're playing somewhere on like FanDuel, like that doesn't hurt you as much. Like he's not going to get you, he can't really get you 30 without a touchdown on FanDuel, right? Like, so you just hope he doesn't get the touchdown if you're going to build unique stacks because he is super expensive this week.
10-2 on FanDuel, which I feel like is the highest he's been all season. I want to say it's the highest. Yeah. 9.5 on DK. DK, of course, where you get points to those, a full point for the catch as well. So he's a better player there distinctly. Sonny Michel is kind of interesting. 5.8 on DK, 7.1 on FanDuel. Henderson is on the IR, right? He's not coming back this season, or he's not going to be coming back for a while. That's correct. Yes.
Yeah. He's out.
Coming back this year. Yeah.
Season. Akers might potentially play. We'll see. But yeah, I think this is a probably trap spot for Sony though. I mean, we talked about it with Joe Mixon, Joe Mixon didn't do anything on the ground. He got a 1-yard touchdown plunge, and that's what you're going to need from Sony Michel. Sony Michel has not caught the football since he's played at all. It's the difference between how he was used and a little bit of Daryl Henderson. He has no receptions at all. 6 catches for 35 yards. Ravens, number 1 in the NFL in terms of rate of runs that don't gain positive yardage, number 1 rate of the NFL for runs that don't gain 5 more yards. They've been awesome against the run all season, and you have a rushing dependent running back. He's going to have to fall in the end zone. He can with attachment to his offense. The offense is good enough to set up scoring opportunities, but the Ravens don't give up anything really on the ground. You're going to have to catch the football against them. He's not doing that. And when you look at his opponents that he's faced, Sony Michel, this is by far the best run defense he's faced. So I feel like he's a little bit of a trap spot this week, especially with the price hike, because you're going to need, I think, multiple touchdowns from him this week.
They're not going to push Akers, right? Coming back with record time, 5 months, whatever it is from the Achilles, which is super impressive. That's awesome. But like they're trying to get him in like playoff shape, I assume, right? They're not going to maybe like 15%, 10% of snaps or something like that. And you even said maybe they just dress him and see what happens. John, your thoughts as far as that situation? It's going to be Michel mostly, right?
It's going to be Michel, yeah. Even with Daryl Henderson back, this was his second game back from injury this past week. Sonny Michel got the first 20 touches, and Daryl Henderson came on the field in the third quarter finally, and he happened to get injured on his first touch. It's all Sonny Michel's backfield from here on out, and we can rediscuss it for apparently postseason shows we'll be doing. I don't know if I'm supposed to announce that.
Oh boy, it's happening
in the wild card
round.
Plan. Yeah, that's the plan right now. So in the wild card round, we'll rediscuss that then, since the Rams will be there. And yeah, it's just hard to distinguish between the outside receivers. That's why I do like kind of Van Jefferson, but like Rich said, it is, and we know what it is. It's touchdown or bust, since we were trying to attack this Baltimore defense that is just ravaged. It goes back beyond the past 2 weeks too. Like you think in week 10, Tua and Jacoby Brissett combining for over 340 yards, or combining for over 300 yards. Baker had 240 and a touchdown, which at this point is amazing for Baker. Roethlisberger had 230 and 2 TDs, which at this point is amazing for Roethlisberger as well. So yeah, it's just a team that's completely injured. And since Beckham joined the team, he is tied with Cooper Kupp for the most targets, 20 plus yards downfield. Then Jefferson has 25 more air yards, which is indistinguishable. But those two guys are, since we know, just like we talked about with the Packers and Bengals, we know exactly where to target the Ravens. Those two guys are really interesting together for sure.
John, touch on the Baltimore side.
Seems like since the COVID list doesn't exist anymore, we'll get Tyler Huntley, who was ruled out on Friday last week. Now, whether that's enough time for him to be healthy and be back to normal, where he was averaging 6.5 carries per game, that's kind of what we're trying to decide here. Since he did have a 70% completion rate in his 3 starts, very accurate, also throwing a little more downfield. We saw Rashad Bateman did pop up for that touchdown regression since he now leads the team in routes run the past 2 weeks. So yeah, we're pretty much just basically figuring out, like, do you want the rushing floor in a tougher spot against the Rams defense for Tyler Huntley, assuming it's him. If it's Lamar Jackson, that's a whole nother question, because not only was he limited for practice on Wednesday and was limping around noticeably in the beat reporter film, but also, like, remember, before injury, Lamar Jackson, like we talked about, fading him because he had been bad at football for a month leading up to it. And it probably was because the Ravens were just decimated on their offensive line, and he was forced to pretty much try and do everything. So yeah, I think we will be, it looks like, at least getting Huntley in this game.
Lamar, $7K on DK, a little bit cheaper than he normally is. Huntley, I believe he's like, what, 5? Yeah, he's 5'6". We'll talk about Trey Lance, who's 4'6" on DK, which, as of right now, he hit my cap as far as optimals on DK. Not so much on FanDuel. Usual conversation with that. You generally have the money on FanDuel to spend up your quarterback on DK, your funds. A little bit more squeeze. Your thoughts here, Rich, as far as Baltimore? I guess you could play the if then if you want to.
Yeah, I mean, the video of Lamar on the dormant Bermuda grass, which always trips me out with each other practice videos, feels like they're just like practicing on the moon. Did not look hot, man. He didn't look like he was moving very well. So we'll see if Huntley gets off the COVID list and he can play. And then you, like John said, you have to worry about him being running around, but not necessarily for the fact of playing Huntley, because we'll have other options, but just what he means, for potentially a guy like Mark Andrews. I mean, Mark Andrews has soared because he's just getting, for the first time in his career, like efficient freebies. Like I had the tweet earlier about it, just on targets, 10 yards, 10 air yards and below these past 3 weeks from Tyler Huntley and Josh Johnson, 96% of his targets have been catchable on those. With Lamar Jackson, it was just 75% were catchable. Wow. And because of the efficiency of those targets, he's turning them into more. 10.8 yards per catch as opposed to 8.4. That's a 2.5 yard difference. So he's getting like more just accessible free targets, and it's made his ceiling higher because he's no longer having to catch the touchdown or catch the 20-yard target downfield. He's giving you like 4 or 5 8-yard catches and 10-yard catches too. That's how you get to 11 and 10 catch games, 8 catch games, which with Lamar, I mean, it's not a dunk on Lamar's segment, but the fact that he wasn't playing his best football and these guys have been more efficient in the quick game behind an offensive line that is absolutely dreadful, has made Mark Andrews into kind of like this fantasy entity because they only throw the football to 2 guys. Like we've had Bateman pop up 2 weeks ago against the Browns, but he's gone right back to like not being targeted. He had the touchdown last week, but just 4 catches. They only throw to Mark Andrews and Hollywood. And when they only throw to Hollywood 5 yards downfield now too. I mean, he's had more than 55 yards in a game his past 6 games. His ADOT has almost been slashed in half from where it was earlier in the season. He's caught 1 downfield target in the past 2 months of football. So, I mean, it's not a great matchup objectively for Mark Andrews on paper against the Rams, but like, is he a guy like we really, really care? Like if he's going to get double-digit targets, a talent like that, does it really matter who the hell he's playing against? We might see Ramsey on him. To be honest, Ramsey might guard him a little bit this game because Ramsey plays that star position. I mean, we could see some Mark Andrews, Jalen Ramsey battle, which would be fun.
That would definitely be like their best option. They've had several instances where they should have done that. They did not still shadow Ramsey. So I'm curious what's going to happen, but that would be the best option. Yeah.
Yeah. It wouldn't be like him shadowing guy. It'd almost be like him playing his natural position kind of stuff, like what he's been playing.
Andrew's the most expensive tight end on FanDuel by $500. He's 8.7. Oh man, life comes at you fast. Yeah.
It's been hot though, man. He's been hot.
Yeah, I mean that's how the FanDuel scoring system, their pricing some kind of goes. It could be it's very reactionary sometimes. It definitely that's a big jump for Andrews, but certainly he's justified that recently. 8-2 for Kelsey, then Kittle 7-3, Gronk 6-7. We'll talk about him in a second. We got anything else in this game, boys? Or are we moving on?
I think it's about it for this game.
We're moving on. All right, we're gonna break down our players position by position, some of the favorite guys we like in just a second. Before we do that, we have to tell you all about the sponsor, Jock Market. Thank you for sponsoring the show. Do appreciate it. Stop throwing your money away. It's time to check out Jock Market. That is the app where daily fantasy becomes a stock exchange. You buy and you sell shares of players in real time for real money. Download now for a 100% deposit match up to $50. Use the promo code Grinders, GRINDERS. Now get this. If you do not turn a profit this week, Jock Market, they're going to cover your losses in your very first event. Download Jock Market in the app or Play stores or check out jockmarket.com. That's JOCKMKT.com. Again, use the promo code Grinders for a 100% deposit match up to $50 on your first deposit. John, there's some scheduled blowouts here, as far as quarterbacks. Josh Allen versus Atlanta, Tom Brady versus the Jets, like just some walloping, some shellackings, whatever adjective you want to use. But in theory, they have the opportunity to score like 4 or 5 touchdowns. Herbert versus Denver. The DK price for Herbert's really appealing. I think at 6.8K. You got Hurts versus Washington, and then Lance. 6-4 on FanDuel. I'm not sure how much you need that, but Trey Lance is 4-8 on DK. Or they're just going to run the ball a ton with Elijah Mitchell and Deebo Samuel. Who knows how that's going to go down? Any of those guys do anything for you? Who pops out for you?
The last time the Chargers played the Broncos earlier this year too, we thought it was going to be a slog, and it turned out to be like an up-tempo affair. So that's interesting. On your Brady point, we discussed the potential of the offensive scheme just changing without 2 Hall of Famers, Chris Godwin and Mike Evans. And that's actually did what happened. Now they did have a lead for the majority of the game, but they still ran 28 plays within 1 score of the Panthers and finished with their lowest run play rate from neutral situation in any game this year, as they just coasted on more of a running scheme. So, if we don't it doesn't seem like we're getting Mike Evans again, or maybe we will. Did he get activated today? Actually, I may have missed that one.
He did come off the COVID list, but it sounded like he was still skeptical to come back from the hamstring injury, but we'll stick a pin in it.
Another caveat to figure out for week 17. Wonderful. But no, we'll go ahead and just talk about the Trey Lance thing, because it's just hard, even at 4,600, even though we know he's going to be heavily rostered, akin to the Cam Newton, Taysom Hill, very cheap week where everyone paid down to win tournaments, just because the rushing upside gets you there. It's just so hard to poke ownership and poke holes in the ownership he's going to garner, since he scored 15 fantasy points in his lone start this year without either a rushing touchdown, passing touchdown, or George Kittle available in that game. And then now he's recorded a carry on 26% of his snaps, which for reference, Cam Newton's at 18.5%, Lamar Jackson's at 16.5%, and Taysom Hill's at 15%. So it's just a rushing quarterback that even if he throws like 1 or 2 touchdowns, imagine what kind of ceiling he has. He legitimately has QB1 overall ceiling in this game. So at 4,600, it's a different discussion on FanDuel because you need those touchdowns to happen. But on DraftKings for the rushing upside, I mean, it's as enticing as the models make it look to be.
So Wednesday night optimals, take it for what it's worth. I capped it at 50% on both DK and on FanDuel. Trey Lance, 50% of lineups on DK. FanDuel, 1% of lineups. Who's in 50% of lineups on FanDuel? Josh Allen, then Mahomes, then Dak Prescott. Rich, your thoughts as far as all the guys we've thrown out there, who's kind of jumping out for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think Lance is pretty easy to make the argument for in the cash game lineups. Maybe you go off in tournaments because you don't know how high the ceiling could potentially get, because we just don't know. And it could be a game where they, obviously can run the football against Houston, who everyone has run the football against, Rashad Penny to Justin Jackson to any X amount of player. They've all gotten there against Houston. So I assume the 49ers run game is going to be just okay here. I'm more curious about what Lance does to the rest of the pieces. I guess that's more of like a season-long thing than a DFS stance. Because remember when Lance did play in week 5, and it was only a 1-game sample, he was 32nd in completion rate below expectation. Obviously he didn't have George Kittle in that game, but he was a terrible passer in that game. And so I'm curious to see if it lowers the ceiling of guys like Deebo and George Kittle and Brandon Ayuk. That's more of a season-long thing. I think
that was also, remember, that was when Ayuk was only playing 70% of snaps. It was still in the doghouse as well. It wasn't complete. I don't know who the Superman is. Batman Ayuk. I don't know. Whatever the superhero is that levels up. Vegeta.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's one of these things we just don't know where the ceiling goes. So maybe you come in under on tournaments, but cash game is really easy to make the argument just because the rushing floor is so high at his price with the amount of rushing attempts he had. And he's going to be a big part of the rushing thing. And he can run for touchdowns too. Definitely interested in the Bucks a lot. They had a chance to still get there last week. They kicked a bunch of field goals that kind of capped them off. I mean, I'm like Gronk looks amazing to me this week. He's been like kind of down the last 2 weeks. But he faced two of the top teams against opposing tight ends in the season so far in the Saints and Panthers. Now he gets a Jets team. Oh, that's lying. This is not the tight end segment, but I'm super excited about Gronk anyways. I think he's the guy. Like yeah. I mean, but that just ties back into, Brady. I mean, all the Bucks just have tremendous matchups this week. Ronald Jones, Antonio Brown, you get all those guys. AB, man, the dude is just good at football. We could talk about all the stuff and how goofy he is off the field and all the dumb shit he does, but dude, he shadow realmed Stephon Gilmore on a route. Like the dude can just play. It is what it is, man. We could separate the two facts.
50%, is that what it was? 50% of the target share last week?
That's the other reason why I'm on Gronk too a little bit, is because there's just no way he's going to have 50% targets. I mean, definitely keep playing Antonio Brown. I think he'll be fine, but he's not going to have 50% target share this week either. Bingo. But and same thing. Josh Allen's great spot too. The Falcons are last in the NFL in pressure rate. They're last in the NFL in sacks. With the Bills, we know that they keep their foot on the gas pedal. So yeah, business as usual. I think we covered like all the good quarterbacks. I think it's pretty much Lance and Cash, and you just build around all the quarterbacks we've talked about that are good, and you can add Jalen Hurts in there as well.
How long is Jimmy G hurt for? Is he done for the season? Is that it?
No one knows, but I can tell you what, everything that Kyle Shanahan is pulling seems like ultimate gamesmanship, because any like person with like medical background on Twitter says like this injury is like there's no way he can play with it.
Okay, so I'm just trying to think like maybe they want to get Lance to actually, get him acclimated to the offense, and they're going to, if they make it to the playoffs, that kind of thing. And a Houston defense seems like a good spot to get him acclimated, and because theoretically they just want to run the ball. But like you think long picture, playoff time, they'd probably have to have Lance throw the ball at some point. Just a thought, like, but I don't know.
Shanahan is such full of shit too. They even haven't allowed Lance to come to the microphone and like speak to media in a month. And Shanahan like said that's part of he called it the what do you call it? The hush behind the scenes plan. Like he named it like a devious plan of like not allowing Lance to talk to people. He says he's been doing amazing the past month, which he could be doing that just to bolster his confidence. But like everything I've seen, it just tells me like, if I can see through your shit and say Trey Lance is going to start on Sunday, I would hope the Texans can also say Trey Lance is starting on Sunday.
Well, that's not even officially announced that he's the starter. I thought it was just assumed.
No, what's announced is like, if you listen to Shanahan, you would think Jimmy G's going to start. But I'm not listening to him.
Okay. Yeah, that doesn't seem everything I've seen out there as well. I wasn't sure if it I thought this week was already decided, but I guess not according to Shanahan. Well, it's not public.
We're not going to know until that injury report has 3 DMPs and questionable on it. Then we'll know for sure.
We started with one. He did not practice today. So
yeah. Since we're here, Rich, how much does Lance, assuming he's going to start, and Elijah Mitchell come back, how much does that hurt? Like, does Debo still get the same amount of carries? What do we expect? It's hard to figure out.
Well, he was still carrying he was still carrying the ball with Elijah Mitchell there too. I know it's been easy to draw that corollary, but the Vikings game, Elijah Mitchell had 25 touches, and Debo still ran 2 in. So I think that's just his role, that hybrid role. The dude's good at football. The problem with the 49ers is you see like happens at Debo, right? Like we were clamoring, we're like, oh man, they got to get him more targets. They've got to get more targets. If he doesn't score a rushing touchdown, his floor is going to be too low. Well, he didn't score a rushing touchdown, and they gave him 11 targets. But the problem is when someone on the 49ers gets 11 targets, someone else gets screwed, and it was George Kittle last week. Like there's always just a supply and demand problem with targets in the pass game with the 49ers. And that's why we have been like wanting like to see like what this offense can ascend to, because all these guys should be able to be good on a week-to-week basis, and they still don't have it. And probably still in the fledgling part of Lance's career, it still will be like that. But it's really frustrating with the 49ers that we have to play this whack-a-mole game of like, well, who's getting the 3 targets this game?
It's difficult. It feels like George Kittle, more than many other players, has the biggest like floor to ceiling potential. Like it's just, he's one of those guys just really, really hard to project. You just got, the floor can be low, and sometimes they just have him blocking a bunch and gets just 2 targets or something like that. But yeah, we've seen his ceiling games as well too. Let's move on to talk about running backs, Rich. John Taylor He's 10K on FanDuel, 9K on DK versus Vegas. Eckler, assuming he's back this week, 9 on FanDuel, 8.2 on DK. Montgomery is getting a big share. Swift apparently is coming back today. This week, I don't buy the Swift one, man. Maybe they're not going to, there's no incentive to push Swift, right? Like maybe he plays, but what's the point? Like what is the upside in grinding Swift 25 carries or 25 touches? That's my initial, I feel like that feels like fool's gold or whatever. And Reynolds, I think, is still lurking, or he's still a person, and Williams is still there. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to play DeAndre Swift, but who knows? I mean, listen, they're trying to instill a demeanor in Detroit. So I don't know. Maybe they're all tough football players, but there is no, like, I don't even, they should shut him down, to be honest. But that's not our decision to make. But yeah, we talked about the Bucs a little bit. I mean, listen, keep playing Ronald Jones. Everyone gets there against the Jets. Even Dare Ogunbowale by transitive property found the end zone against them last week. Daigle hit on the game script. That'll be in play. Listen, man, I don't know if anyone wants to believe in this Devin Singletary thing. He keeps popping every week in like my DFS thing I write up. And every week I'm like, I'm still not going to play him. But he's now at 50 of the 58 backfield touches over the past 3 games. They're huge favorites against Atlanta, who's 21st in rushing points allowed to running backs and 24th in receiving points allowed to running backs. So like he just feels like a guy that gets overlooked because it's Devin Singletary, but the elite offense, and he's a workhorse now. And remember the end of his rookie season, the workload he was getting? That's like what he's getting now. And like people were excited about him. Remember going into that offseason, he's get back to that usage. So he's super cheap though. Like he's affordable. We talked about Daryl Williams. And we're in the year of the fantasy ghost. We've had Duke Johnson and Laquan Treadwell and Cordell Patterson and Rex Burkhead. And listen, Rashad Penny, man, is here again. He's now smashed 2 of his soft matchups. He didn't hit against the Rams, which, all right, you didn't hit against the Rams, but smashed against the Texans, smashed against the Bears, and now faces a Detroit team that's 31st in touchdowns allowed to running backs. They're 27th in rushing yards per game allowed to running backs, and they're 28th in rushing points allowed per game to running backs. Rashad Penny, man, let him in your heart.
The only issue is, not everyone will be able to cite the same stats you did, but everyone already sees, he's playing the Lions. Like the issue is Rashad Penny chalk is what we're going to be dealing with when we have so many options.
I don't think he'll be chalky still, but
I think most people do that, like Nolay of the Penny too. Like, yeah, you'll get a sprinkle here and there, but a few people take a stand, like feel great about it. But like, you're right. The spot there against Detroit certainly makes sense. By the way, again, my Wednesday night optimals, I cap running back at 70%, Rich. 70% of optimals, Montgomery on FanDuel, 70% Montgomery on DK. It's not full in the math.
He looks good too.
Volume and opportunity trumps everything else pretty much. John, your thoughts as far as some running backs? Feel free to pile on the guys we talked about already or add some new names to the conversation.
Yeah, well, Montgomery, because he's also getting the passing game usage all of a sudden, 31 targets in his last 4 games. Like, you can't deny that in a positive game script. Like, now, whether the Bears should be laying a touchdown to anyone, even the Giants, is a whole nother discussion for betting. But the game script still, you would expect, is great for David Montgomery. If we can distinguish, if we get the injury report on one or the other Eagles running back, if it's Boston Scott starting without Jordan Howard or Miles Sanders, like that's such an awesome play. Even in a tough matchup where Washington's historically been able to continue stopping the run this year, remember, like, the Eagles O-line has had success against the Saints, the Bucks, in significantly tougher matchups. Like, their offensive line trumps whichever defensive line is trying to stop them. And so Boston Scott, if he gets
in the scheme, it's like the Ravens. Like when you have a quarterback and you're running that RPO game, like it's different to stop. We've seen them trounce the Saints 2 years in a row running the football. When you're able to run with your quarterback and incorporate that, we've seen it at the Ravens for the last 2 years.
It's the Browns also, just dropping Dearness Johnson in with COVID and injuries. And it's like, doesn't matter. We just run our scheme with the same guys and let Dearness Johnson, who it's still amazing. Anytime he gets a touch, even with the 4.640, just looks like the most patient and fastest runner on the field. He is genuinely an incredible running back. I hope he lands in a spot this offseason where he can get a lot of touches since he's a free agent. And then also, we hit on Jonathan Taylor a little bit, but I will say his success, he was going to probably get there anyways. He's Jonathan freaking Taylor, but his success has like directly coincided with Quentin Nelson's health. And the fact Quentin Nelson got activated, it seems like we're going to have potentially a full offensive line for the Colts. Like, that does make a huge difference. So I would have more confidence paying up for Jonathan Taylor I don't want to say this, but you can't get both on FanDuel. But I think Jonathan Taylor's the better play over Cooper Kupp. I think.
I mean, at 10-2, Cooper Kupp, like he has to score touchdowns at 10-2.
Right.
Like there's a way where Cooper Kupp can have a really good game on FanDuel and still not bury you, just because on DraftKings, with the full point PPR, you get to the bonus and you're stacking a point per catch. That's how you get to you can get 20 without a touchdown there. And then you're talking 30, 40, like we've seen the Devontae Adams games. But on FanDuel, like those, he cannot wreck you. He can have the 9 for 100 or the 10 for 95 and not wreck you.
The Cup for 12 for 150 with a 3-point bonus on DK is still what, 30 points for 9K? Like you're fine. Like that's okay, but you don't need that. So on a 14 game slate, you don't need that either. Question here, John, you're talking about Philadelphia. And the tricky thing is, Sanders is out, but there's still Scott lurking. There's Howard, Gainwell, and there's also the quarterback that can still touchdowns too. Do you think there'll be one clear guy that is like the obvious one? I say obvious in air quotes, obviously, because you don't really know who it's going to be and those goal line carries necessarily. That's kind of my issue here. Even with Sanders gone, it will be kind of a 3-headed monster to some degree, or who knows? We're just guessing.
It's possible they call up Jason Huntley, but we even saw last week they had Kenneth Gainwell active. They had all 4 their backs active, and then Jordan Howard and Miles Sanders left. Boston Scott got 20 snaps. Kenneth Gainwell only played 2 snaps. Like it was all Boston Scott. And so maybe if they build a lead, then Kenneth Gainwell comes in for relief. But also, like you have to get to that lead. And Boston Scott will be the one helping you build that lead. So still complete confidence. Now, if Jalen Hurts scores like a couple bunny touchdowns, like scores from the 1-yard line, we saw that a couple weeks ago where he stole 2 touchdowns, certainly possible. But that's probably why some people would not play him, even if he's the only back available. Whereas I would love to get on cheap Boston Scott.
One more I think is interesting is Damian Harris, especially. Do we know about Stevenson if he's going to be in or now?
He's back.
He's back today.
Okay. I mean, I guess he's still in play. It's the Jags, right? But, obviously downgrade him appropriately. Patterson, 7 carries last week? And again, Atlanta's just sort of playing out the string, and they're just not pushing him as far as touches, as far as carries, as far as snaps. And it's not a great matchup against Buffalo either. Are we out on Patterson? I saw you shaking your head there, John.
Oh, I knew the potential of what he had in store last week. And then he scored that first touchdown in the first quarter. And I thought, I didn't play him. My mistake. I knew he was an awesome play. And then, it just got scaled back from there. It's just been really hard to pinpoint. Like we even talked about it last week, how we said he returned to his normal role, like 62% of the snaps, still playing even with Mike Davis. But in this past game, I believe 8 touches to Mike Davis's 8. They split 50-50. 8 touches each. So it's just, like pinpointing Cordell Patterson is like pinpointing Joe Mixon passing game script. It's like, I can't do it. And I'm done trying.
And and again, they have no reason to push him. Like there's just no point at this point in the season.
Well, 57% of snaps. Hurts end zone targets over Kyle Pitts. So I can't imagine them wanting to try to push Cordell Patterson.
Let's move on to the receiver. By the way, Rich, we were talking about the, FanDuel being highly reactionary. Antonio Brown is now 8-5 on FanDuel. We know how egregious he was. Yeah, well, I mean, he's more expensive than Diggs. $500 more than Samuel, more expensive than Keenan Allen and AJ Brown, a whole bunch of guys. DK reactionary to some degree, but he's still 6-1 over there, which seems like still too cheap.
Oh my God, no, that's way too cheap.
Yeah.
So against the Jets.
Yes.
instant chalk again. Like load him up. We talked about the dude is just the dude is just good at football. I mean, we knew this. Like he's a Hall of Fame player. Like he literally had a Jerry Rice like run in the the 2010s.
Yeah.
Like where he just paced the position for like 5 straight years, just put up Boku numbers. Him and Brady have like a clear mind meld too. Like they've always had it. They're on the same page. Dude comes off the street, hasn't played a football game since week 6. And just gets peppered at 50% of targets, looks super clean, running just pristine routes. And now he faces a Jets team that's 31st in yards per target allowed to opposing wide receivers, 29th in points allowed per target. Just lock him in. 6-1 is crazy. 8-5 at least gives you a choice, and I still think it's too cheap. But 6-1 on a full PPR site, a lock button.
He's the third most expensive guy in FanDuel. You think that's still too cheap? Like Kupp at 10-2, Samuel 9K. He's third most expensive. He's more expensive than Hill and
Diggs, I think he should be 9K. I think he should be 9K.
Last week, FanDuel was a good conversation because Ronald Jones was cheaper but also like with so many backs in his range, like it made sense to pay up for Antonio Brown as a game theory play at 7K because it was still too cheap. Now Ronald Jones scored the touchdown, Antonio Brown did not. So 10 for 107 was good, but like we talked about with Cooper Kupp, he didn't get the touchdown. So it really wasn't like a play you needed to have at 7K. But yes, still a great play. 61 is far too cheap.
Yeah, I mean the DK 6-1, you're just throwing him in your cash. If you're playing cash lineups, he's like one of the first person you load in there. It's not even a conversation. You know who's interestingly?
I mean, 6-1 has to be like wide receiver 25 or something on the slate.
I remember how angry you were last week when you found out he was 4'9".
Well, go pull up like Fantasy Pros right now and see where the industry's ranking Antonio Brown in full PPR. I guarantee you it's like wide receiver 6 or higher, and he's priced at 6'1". Like he's probably the same price as like freaking Terry McLaurin or some shit. Like, what are we doing?
Yeah, I mean, DK not as reactionary on that one. FanDuel, just said shoot him right up to the third most expensive receiver on the board. AJ Brown is really popping at optimals right now, and I don't know. I mean, I don't love the matchup against Miami, if you want to say that, and it's kind of sort of similar thing. But he's 7.5 on FanDuel, 7.2 on DK. We saw him come back. He was a monster last week. Good for him. Do we have an AJ Brown take? Do we like him? I mean, certainly in tournaments, yes. Of course, he's got to be in the mix. But Rich, is he somebody that like is screaming like a great play or a great value? I don't know.
My 8th place best ball teams were so thrilled with last Thursday's performance. Very sad to see Arthur Juan, the ship, go down this year, but he's good at football, so it's nice to see him come out and ball out. The dude is an absolute beast. I mean, but we've seen now this season, he's given us some real big spike weeks. He's had a 10 for 155 and 1. He's had an 8 for 133 and 1. He's had an 11 for 145 and 1. And he's also had 49 yards or fewer in 5 of 9 games he's played. So there is some volatility there. I don't think he's by any means some kind of lock button. Not as strong as I feel about Antonio Brown, but yeah, we've seen the spike upside be available to him. And he's a guy that can win in any matchup too. He's number 3 in the NFL. The sample is a little small, and it's small for Antonio Brown. He's 3rd in the NFL in target rate per route run. Antonio Brown's 1st, and then Cooper Kupp is sandwiched between them, who obviously is the full season sample. But when the Titans they throw to AJ Brown, and we'll see throughout the week, but both Julio and Nick Westbrook-Ikhine were put on a COVID list too. We'll see if they get off, but it's really just the only guy they can throw to.
Is it like is Miami defense as good as they may seem, or is it kind of a product of how poor the quarterbacks they have faced? Is it a little bit of column A,
yeah,
a little bit
both.
of column B, that kind of thing?
We inherently know that they have a talented defense, and they were good last year, and they can force turnovers. They've got good secondary pieces and good pass rushers. They were injured at the beginning of the year, and they weren't getting the turnovers, so it's both. But they're definitely a team that, like, when you get into the dance, though, like their offense isn't good enough to play with some of these teams, though.
If the Raiders and Dolphins, like if they do get into the participation trophy playoffs, like we know the teams are betting against the wild card round. We know the faux contenders because of the schedule they had.
John, you have a thought there as far as AJ Brown and like other receivers? We haven't really talked about anybody else. Feel free to add some dudes to the conversation.
Yeah, AJ Brown has averaged a 32% target share in 8 full games this year. So at least we know we'll get hammered. Even last week with Julio Jones, the spirit of Julio Jones, at least available on the field. AJ Brown had a 55% target share, just absurdly. So yeah, sure, you're playing him for the targets. On that same note, I think Jalen Waddle is an awesome play. I'm sure everyone will get there, but at least 9 targets in 6 of his last 7 games. He's been injured in one of those, but still accrued 11 targets before going out. And then, let's just keep on going back to Amon-Ra St. Brown, who even got it done with Tim Boyle under center somehow. Amon-Ra St. Brown now just a 33% target share in his last 4 games. Josh Reynolds, I don't know if Josh Reynolds was cleared from the COVID list today. Maybe he is, but like Brock Wright, Josh Reynolds, some guys that were playing heavy snaps around him were at least placed on the COVID list on Tuesday. So we don't know that had their limitations, whatever. Jared Goff back as well. Jared Goff, recall, played really well in his last 3 games prior to getting on the COVID list. So yeah, like ARSB may come under the radar, even though we know he has just a significantly high floor and ceiling in this slate.
Yeah,
we've been talking about him for weeks, and like, the price finally caught up with him, but he's
a guy, like he's an archetype of receiver I'm always slow to come around on. Like Hunter, he's in the same spot that Hunter Renfrow fell into, right? Like the same, like he ended up being the only guy in the offense because once Waller got hurt, Ruggs left, Waller got hurt. and the Raiders were like, oh man, all these other guys suck. We can only throw to Hunter Renfrow. And that's what happened to the Sun God. Like, Hawkinson, Swift left, Hawkinson left. And they're like, oh, this is like the only dude we got. Like, we got to use him creatively. And he's just been smashing targets and getting there for the last month.
I just did a quick Google search. I went on playerprofiler.com. Amon-Ra St. Brown. You know who his best comparable is? Anybody want to venture a guess? Throw a name out there? Not somebody who thought about in a while. I don't think he's still in the league. I'm pretty sure.
Who was awesome from the slot, but bad from the boundary in college. But also, he was the number 1 recruit in California to USC. I don't know, because he was a somewhat good prospect. I don't know.
Drafted in the 4th round, apparently. Brandon Lloyd, former San Francisco receiver.
Oh, okay.
That's a terrible comp.
Well,
I love Matt Kelly.
Player profiler.
That's an absolutely terrible comp. Brandon Lloyd is like a boundary circus catch wide receiver. Like the dude he just made ridiculous catch after ridiculous catch. That's a terrible comp. I love Matt Kelly and I love player profiler. That's a garbage comp. That's as bad as when people use the Laviska Chenault to Des Bryant objective comp because they're big and they had the same measurables. As players, they're nowhere close. Not even in the same, like, they different play styles, different archetypes, different everything.
Shots fired, calling out the fantasy mansion.
No, I love those guys. Listen, I got my book right here, my Matt Kelly book. I've got it right here.
How did you get a book? I wanted his pod last week, and I've been going two pods per year with him, and I didn't get a freaking book. Although I guess I don't have a house, he would have to send it to Silva. But
that's the green room, like parting package for the.
I will say I love it. I've got credit for a couple pictures on there. I don't know if it's up there, but Rondell Moore, I referred to as Ant-Man on the podcast before, and he used to be the picture when you go to Rondell Moore. It was just a picture of Ant-Man.
That's amazing. I will check that in a second as I throw it to the tight ends. John, tight ends. Well, Rich, you already talked about your love for Gronk. Do you double down on that? Are you in on that as well, John? I assume. And Kittle, we talked about him. Like, his ceiling is immense. His floor is not ideal. Goddard versus Washington. Pitts. It's so weird. Like, is he had a good year or a bad year? I have no idea. Like, week to week, my opinion changes on him. And so it depends on how you felt coming to the season, where he was drafted and season long and all that kind of stuff. All right, John, what do you have for me as far as tight ends as I Google Rondell Moore and his player profile?
Yeah, we hit on Gronk and all the reasons why we were going to play him. He was on my list. Dalton Schultz, we already talked about, heavy on my list. Also, if you're going to pay down, like, everyone keeps getting there on Cole Kmet. The issue about Cole Kmet, he just doesn't score touchdowns. Like, you see Jimmy Graham, like, everyone cites the snaps and the routes run, but like those 7 snaps, those 7 routes run Jimmy Graham runs, it's literally inside the 20. Like, they put him on the field for red zone, which is why he keeps accumulating end zone targets over Cole Kmet. So, like, Cole Kmet is actually like the worst play because he doesn't have a ceiling. Like, there's no point in playing, but he's never going to score a touchdown unless it comes from outside the 40-yard line. So I just never play Cole Kmet, but 400 more than Cole Kmet. I will say there has been a little bit of a usage change for Foster Moreau in the last 3 weeks. Playing at least 97% of the snaps there and now averaging 6.5 targets per game in that span. We don't know about Darren Waller's participation just yet. And I understand Foster Moreau let us down those first couple of games because he wasn't an every down player. But the last 3 weeks, they have catered more to him because they need more help. And so, we're still waiting on Brian Edwards as well. We'll see if he comes back at full strength since he was put on the COVID list last week. But overall, yeah, like, if you're going to pay down, Foster Moreau is kind of my guy I'm sitting on down there.
Yeah, Waller went on the COVID list today.
Okay.
And plus the injury, which we don't know what the hell is going on with that.
And the malfeasance, it's like egregious how coaches, including the Raiders, have handled the IR this year. Just like letting guys sit there for 5 weeks. Oh yeah, they'll come back and practice. Bro, like, you could just slap them on there, get 3 games for an extra guy on a year. Everyone needs their full roster. And instead they just let these guys sit there DNPing all week. It's like, come on, I'd like, pay me. I'll run your roster for you. Rich will be happy to know Player Profiler still has Rondell Moore's picture as Ant-Man. It's in character.
Beautiful.
It's not a picture of John Cusack. T.Y. Hilton, by the way, is his best comparable. That feels like a good comp. Oh yeah, Paul Rudd. I'm not a superhero guy. Yeah, I get Cusack and Rudd confused, but yeah, okay, that makes more sense.
He kind of is modern Cusack though, a little bit. It's not terrible.
Yeah, I feel like they're kind of sort of the same guy, just like 10 years apart. Well, Cusack, what, 55 or something like that? Doesn't matter. Yeah, I'm not I don't think John is either. Rich, you're a resident superhero expert, I think, by default, if nothing else.
Yeah, I mean, I am. I'm into all that stuff. I grew up reading comics and everything, so but that's why I made the comp to the Ant-Man.
You still got 2 weeks or so, maybe 3 weeks, whatever it is. You can finally catch up on your DVR and all your superhero shows.
Oh, dude. I mean, Succession's first. Definitely get to that. There's a list.
All right. Yeah. You're going to have yourself a good time for sure. Throw out some tight ends you like.
We covered most of the guys. I do like Moreau as the cheap guy. I like that call. Gronk, Goddard. We covered pretty much all the dudes though. Zach Ertz as your floor guy. That pretty much covers it. We said it's not been like a great stretch to pay down. Like you've got to pick one of these guys. Gronk is my flavor of choice at the top. We'll see what happens throughout the week though, and if I have to come off that at the end of the week. But I'm looking at this Bucks onslaught and just looking at playing Brady, Ronald Jones, Antonio Brown, and Gronk all together, and just going ham.
No run back, right? Any run back or no?
No, just going ham. Wait, Elijah Moore might come back. I mean, I'm not going to play him, but stick a pin that he might come back because he was getting like a ton of targets before he got hurt.
Do you have a favorite game stack this week, John, on a Wednesday night? Of course, this kind of stuff can change, but any sort of game that's sticking out for you?
Cowboys double stacks were sticking out. Naked Trey Lance with the offensive stacks I like are sticking out. And then, Daryl Williams to get my exposure to what I expect to be a slowed down Chiefs-Bengals game.
All right. We've reached the end of week 17. As John mentioned before, we plan on doing at least 1 week of the wild card. That'll be good times for sure. Of course, week 18 on layaway will be here next Wednesday night, and that's going to be fun, I'm sure. We're going to have a lot of information to parse through on week 18. I'm told that's the information slate. A lot of times you don't have that information on Wednesday night, but we're going to do our best for sure. With that said, Rich, tell the people, I mean, come on, we always say this, like if they don't know it by now, but whatever, maybe there's one guy out there that's like, this Rich fella, he's pretty sharp, he's pretty smart. But where do I find his content around the interwebs?
Sharpfootballanalysis.com. I mean, all the stuff I do in the playoffs will be free. You can find me here every Wednesday night and potentially extra Wednesdays coming up with my boys, Daigle and Dean.
Same deal, Daigle.
Extra Wednesdays would be nice. At Najee Daigle on Twitter, NBCSportsEdge.com, where I'm going now to update the waiver wire column for Wednesday night, just in case, it's just you and your league mates sitting around on waivers, and thus the actual process, the deadline doesn't matter because y'all are just fighting each other anyways over players late in the week, waiting for the COVID list. So it'll be there, and a good football show on iTunes.
Do appreciate y'all checking us out here for the NFL Pick Six show. That was Rich. That was John. I was Dean. That was football. We're out of here. Holler.